Hello everyone, please like and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss our stories.
The snow blanketed everything in a deep, unbroken hush. The forest around their Wisconsin home stood silent, the trees frosted and white, every branch heavy with ice. Pa had spent weeks packing their few prized possessions, carefully selecting only what was needed. The worn wagon creaked under the weight of their bundles, blankets folded tight against the cold, sacks of flour, a pot or two, Ma's heavy iron skillet, and the precious fiddle with its newly tightened strings. The girls, Mary and Laura, clung to each other in excitement and dread, their small hands red from the cold as they watched Pa and Ma arrange their little world to fit inside the wagon's wooden frame. Baby Carrie, bundled in layers, peeked from Ma's arms with wide, wondering eyes. The morning they left, the sky was the pale gray of winter dawn. The horse's breath hung in misty clouds. Pa stood tall, his face full of hope and resolve. He lifted Laura up, setting her carefully on the wagon seat beside Mary. Ma checked once more that nothing was left behind, then climbed up with Carrie in her lap. The house, a patchwork of logs, warmed by their laughter for so many years, stood quietly behind them, already part of a memory. Laura's heart ached with the leaving, a bittersweet pull of everything she had ever known slipping away into the stillness of the woods. As they set out, the wheels carved deep ruts in the snow. The wagon rolled through the silent hush of winter forest, horses plodding steadily forward. The forest, usually alive with birdsong and summer rustle, felt different under the weight of snow. Strange, even a little foreboding. Shafts of pale sunlight struggled through the icy boughs. The only sound was the crisp crunch of hooves and wheels, the occasional jingle of the harness, and Pa's voice coaxing the horses on. Days passed, marked by the glow of dawn and the slow fall of darkness. Sometimes, the forest closed around the trail, pressing thick trunks and tangled branches against their little road. At midday, they ate from Ma's tin pail, biscuits baked back home, cold but comforting, with cheese or a slice of cured bacon. Laura watched the steaming horses and the snow brushing Pa's shoulders. She felt both safe and suddenly frightened, wondering if the forest would ever end. Then there were challenges. One bitter morning, the river ahead had frozen, its surface a blue-white sheen. Pa studied the thickness of the ice, his eyes narrowed against the wind. He led the horses out, the wagon creaking as it rolled onto the uncertain bridge. Laura felt her heart pound. The ice moaned and shifted beneath their weight. Once, a crack erupted nearby, quick and sharp like thunder. But Pa pressed on, whispering to the horses, and breathed a deep sigh of relief when they reached the other side. Mary took Laura's cold hand, squeezing it in silent comfort, while Ma sang softly to keep Carrie calm. Nights were cold, fierce with wind. Pa always stopped the wagon near a thicket or sheltering copse. He would build a fire, careful, blowing on the spark until it caught, orange flames licking skyward. The heat was a warm embrace after long hours in the open air. They sat together beneath a patchwork of stars, Mary and Laura leaning against Ma, soup or porridge warming their bellies. Those nights, Pa would lift his fiddle from its case. He played tunes sweet and wild, notes weaving through the darkness and dancing with the wind. Sometimes Laura closed her eyes tight, listening, and she forgot about the cold and the strangeness and thought only of home, of laughter, of Pa's songs carrying them through whatever might come. The world changed as they moved south, traveling farther each day. The heavy forests thinned. The trees grew further apart. Mornings dawned colder, sharper, but the sky grew bigger. Soon, the last line of trees slipped behind them, and the land stretched open, unfolding endlessly, as if the earth itself wanted to show them its heart. Here, the wind was ever present, singing through the dry grass that rippled in waves. There were no other wagons on the road. Sometimes, Laura saw a bird rise from the grass or watched the clouds roil above, their shadows racing after the wagon. She felt very small, as if she and her family were the only people in the world. But the prairie was not empty. There were skittering ground squirrels and invisible rustlings in the tall grass. Jack, the brindle bulldog, ran beside the wagon, nose close to the ground, ears perked, tail wagging. He would stop and bark at things unseen, only to hurry back at Pa's whistle. At night, the coyotes howled far across the open space, wild and lonesome. Laura pressed closer to Mary, comforted by Pa's gentle hint, Oslawed hand, and the constant rhythmic sound of Ma's voice. And with each passing mile, Laura's fear was tempered by a growing wonder. The world was bigger and wilder than she had imagined. She watched dust rise behind their wheels and felt the sun's unfiltered warmth. She saw wildflowers bloom in sheltered hollows, even with frost still in the morning air. She asked questions about the stars they could see so clearly now, about the birds' strange calls, about what lay ahead over the next horizon. Pa would answer, always patient, always reassuring. We're pioneers, Laura. We make a home wherever we go. Finally, after days blurred one into another, the wagon stopped on a piece of land unlike any they had known. There were no trees, just grass, sky, and wind so strong it pulled at Laura's braids. Pa stood, surveying the land. He pointed to the horizon, measuring out space with his eyes. The girls clambered down, Mary holding tight to Ma, Laura nearly tumbling in her eagerness, feeling the oddness of solid earth after so long. Here, the world was vast and uncluttered, filled with possibility. Pa's smile was gentle, pride welling in his eyes. The horses were unharnessed, gratefully pawing the ground. The sound of the wind was like the beginning of a story, full of promise. Laura looked all around. No fences, no neighbors, only the prairie reaching to forever. And in that first breath of open sky, she felt something new, a hope shaped by courage, stitched together with the spirit of those she loved most. Whatever hardships awaited, she knew, as long as their family was together, they could endure. On that wind-swept land with her family, Laura's heart opened to the unknown, ready to begin again, brave and hopeful on the boundless prairie. The old world was left behind, and before them stretched a new adventure, as wide as the sky itself. The journey to the prairie had been long and tiring, but there was a sense of possibility in the air as the Ingalls family stepped down from their wagon, boots pressing into unbroken earth. All around them, the prairie spread out wide and wild, a sea of grass rippling beneath the endless sky. The horizon seemed to stretch forever, marked only by the restless wind and the promise of new beginnings. Here, Pa declared, they would make their home, a declaration filled with hope, determination, and a quiet courage that ran through every member of the family. Without delay, the work of settling began. Pa's keen eyes scanned the landscape, looking for signs of shelter and resources. He chose a high-level patch of land, practical and dry, close to a trickling stream that would quench both the family's thirst and the needs of their animals. The decision felt profound. This spot would be the center of their new world. Often before dawn, Pa would set out toward the distant line of woods that bordered the prairie, his axe glinting in the first pink light of morning. The woods were sparse but vital, offering the timbers needed for building. With great effort, he cut down each tree and trimmed the branches, working with a steady rhythm honed by years of labor. He lashed each log to the wagon, horses snorting and stamping as they pulled the heavy load back to the chosen knoll. Each journey was a testament to Pa's strength and resolve. He was building not just a house, but a sanctuary against the wildness beyond. Mary and Laura watched in awe as the skeleton of their home took shape. Pa drove each log into place with patient precision, using his hammer and axe, his hands rough from years of hard work. Log by log, wall by wall, the house rose up from the earth. Sometimes Mary and Laura carried water or gathered stones to help, feeling proud to be part of the work, their laughter rising in the gentle prairie air. Inside the makeshift camp, Ma kept everything running smoothly. She tended to little Carrie, who babbled and cooed as she watched her family at work. Ma's hands were always busy, kneading dough, stirring pots, mending clothes, and her gentle presence made their rough life feel rich and purposeful. Each evening, she prepared simple meals of salt pork, beans, and bread. Sometimes Laura ran barefoot through the grass, feeling the strange softness underfoot, so different from the firm ground of their old home. Ma's calm voice reassured everyone that, with each task completed, they were one step closer to belonging here. Days passed, and with them came routines that anchored them to this wild new land. Each day, the girls helped build the fire, wash the pots, and gather kindling from the scattered brush. The work was hard, but it brought them together, forging new family memories in the heart of this unfamiliar place. When chores were done, Laura would run far and wide, her feet brushing through the tall grass, as she marveled at the endless flocks of birds and the clouds drifting over fields of green. Yet it was not always easy. The prairie was quiet, sometimes too quiet. There were no church bells ringing in the distance, no neighbors to call on for a cup of sugar or a friendly word. Instead, there was just the sighing of the wind, the sudden calling of a lonely bird, and the hum of insects as darkness fell. The nights felt immense and mysterious, the stars seemingly bigger and closer than they had ever seen before. But life moved forward, guided by optimism and the gentle routines Ma and Pa established. When the log walls held steady and the roof was in place, Pa began the next great task, digging a well. He knew water was life on the prairie, worth more than gold when the days grew hot and dry. This time, a neighbor, Mr. Scott, lent a hand. The two men worked side by side, sweat mixing with dirt, their shovels biting deep into the earth. It was slow, back-breaking work, but together they reached a hidden spring. When the cool, clear water burst forth, it felt like a miracle, glimmering in the sunlight, sweet and pure. Soon after, the home became truly theirs. The low log house, built from Pa's sweat and Ma's care, beckoned invitingly on the prairie knoll. The roof was sealed with thick clay, tight against the rain and wind. Inside, they kept a fire burning, warming the single room through chilly evenings. Laura and Mary shared a blanket at night, comforted by the familiar sound of Ma's soft voice and the gentle cooing of baby Carrie in her cradle. Each evening, as twilight painted the prairie in colors of pink and gold, Pa would take out his violin. The sweet, plaintive notes drifted out across the grass, mingling with the sighing breeze. For Laura, this music bound together everything she loved: the comfort of home, the nearness of her family, the wonder of adventure beginning just outside the door. Though the prairie's vastness sometimes made her feel small and alone, Laura found peace in its wild beauty. She would sit by the window, watching the last rays of sunlight slip below the horizon. The house, sturdy and warm behind her, glowed with lamplight and laughter. Despite the hardships, the lack of neighbors, and the distance from everything familiar, she knew she belonged. This house, fresh built and humble, felt like a promise fulfilled. As days turned into weeks, the Ingalls grew into their new life on the prairie. While the wind still howled over the plains and the landscape remained wide and wild, inside their small home was a world made safe and loving by hard work and hope. Laura understood, in the quiet moments as dusk settled over the grass, that her family's spirit, resilient, joyful, and strong, could make a home anywhere, even on the lonely edge of the world. The prairie would always be a land of mystery and challenge, but their little house stood as proof that with courage, labor, and love, anything could be made possible. In that simple, sturdy cabin, the Ingalls found not only shelter, but each other. And as Laura gazed out at the endless grass beyond her window, the strangeness faded, replaced by a deep and lasting sense of peace. This was her new world, wild, beautiful, and above all, home. Each morning on the untamed prairie began in gentle peace, edged with the promise of hard work and quiet adventure. The first light spilled across the horizon, painting the grasses gold and red, making the little house glow against the endless sky. Laura would wake before the sun had fully climbed, shivering as her feet touched the cool, packed earth floor. Above her, the wind played its song through the thatched roof, and the soft rustling of embers told her Ma was already kindling the morning fire. Pa always rose before everyone else, driven by the steady rhythm of survival. His boots padded out to the small stables, where Jack, their loyal dog, and Pet, their patient pony, waited for oats and a scratch behind the ear. Against the early light, Pa checked fences with careful hands, alert for the signs of predators. Wolves and bobcats prowled the wild nights, their eyes flickering beyond the edge of the firelight. Laura heard them sometimes, their long howls curling through the wind, threading a mixture of fear and thrill through her dreams. She wondered what it would be like to meet one face to face, admiring their wildness but happy for the strong walls of their small house. Each day began with chores, ordered by Ma's patient voice. The simple meals, cornbread, salted pork, thick beans that simmered over the morning stove, became family rituals, their flavors made richer by hunger and the taste of prairie air. Ma taught the girls the ways of the old home, how to knead dough, mend a torn dress, and keep the rooms swept free of dust and spider webs. Mary was attentive, her hands quick and careful as she worked, always eager to please. Laura, too, did her best, but her gaze often wandered to the bright outdoors, long blue grass waving in the wind, the promise of a secret path behind the brush, the flicker of a rabbit's white tail in the distance. Often Pa invited Laura to help him with the outdoor work, sensing her restless energy. She handed him nails as he hammered rough-hewn boards into a fence, or steadied the ladder while he patched the roof. Her favorite moments were the pauses, lying on her back in the grass, watching the cottony clouds drift, or following Pa's boot prints as they checked traps near the stream. The land seemed vast and endlessly new, a kingdom to be explored, where even the smallest chipmunk trail was an exciting mystery waiting to be solved. Some days, Ma let Laura take breaks to wander, so long as Mary watched from the window. Laura learned to identify the wild plants that grew along the creek, sunflowers reaching tall and ragged, purple clover thick with bees, and berries that stained her fingers. She watched the finches gather on fence posts, their small heads cocked in curiosity, and dared herself deeper into the sea of grass where the world went quiet except for the wind and the distant calls of meadowlarks. There were moments of awe and of worry, each shaping the family's sense of belonging in this unfamiliar place. One afternoon, while poking sticks in the muddy banks of the stream, Laura saw strange footprints, larger than hers, pressed deep in the earth. They weren't horse tracks. The shape was unmistakable, the imprint of human toes and heels pointing downstream. Laura stared, her heart fluttering with both fear and excitement before running to fetch Pa. He studied the tracks carefully, then looked out across the prairie, his face shadowed by something solemn. "We're living on their land," Pa said gently, as the morning breeze lifted his hair. "The Indians were here long before us. They know these prairies better than anyone. We have to remember and respect that." Laura listened, not fully understanding, but sensing the gravity in his voice. The prairie, she realized, was not empty. Its silence held stories older than her own, spun by people who had walked these paths, hunted these woods, and watched these same stars from hidden firesides. Though she rarely saw them, sometimes in the far distance, she caught a glimpse of a rider or the thin smoke of a lonely campfire, and wondered what their lives were like. At night, when darkness folded over the house and the wind swept against the windows in a restless dance, the family gathered close by the fire. Shadows flickered on the walls, and Ma's voice wove songs while she rocked the baby in her arms. The sturdy tick-tock of the clock was a gentle comfort. But best of all was when Pa took down his fiddle, the strings shining amber in the light. With calloused fingers, he coaxed lively reels and soft lullabies, the music floating out to join the rustle of the grass and the distant calls of owls. On those evenings, the worries of the day faded, replaced by a sense of hope and togetherness. The prairie was vast, full of challenges. Storms that could flatten their crops, wild animals that prowled the night, loneliness that sometimes pressed on their hearts. But as Laura listened to the music and felt the warmth of her family close beside her, she understood they were making something new in this wilderness. Each day's labor, each loaf baked, each fence post planted, each song sung was a promise kept to themselves and to the land. Slowly, the wildness became familiar. The paths Laura walked grew soft beneath her feet. The creek was now a place of play, not just a boundary between safety and the unknown. The prairie, once empty and intimidating, revealed its treasures. Plums that ripened in hidden thickets, nests tucked beneath the roots of towering grasses, and deer that bounded through the morning mist. Each sunset felt like a reward at the end of a day's honest work, bathing the fields in color and reminding Laura how much beauty there was in the life they were shaping. The days passed with a steady rhythm marked by the seasons. There were storms and droughts, but also wildflowers and bright, wind-blown days. Laura grew strong and sun-browned, as did her sisters, each learning, little by little, the secrets of living in harmony with this wide and unpredictable land. The routine of chores and song, of laughter and quiet, built a foundation that held them steady no matter what came. In the heart of the wild, the Ingalls family found more than survival. They found a sense of belonging, the thrill of discovery, and the courage to dream. The prairie, in all its mystery and majesty, became their teacher and their home. And in the gentle glow of each evening's fire, Laura could not help but feel both very small and very big, a part of something old and grand, crafting each day a new life for herself and those she loved. When the first rays of sunlight stretched across the endless prairie, the world felt both fresh and unknown, a place where each morning arrived as a promise as much as a mystery. Soft mist clung to the waving grass, sparkling with dew in the gentle warmth. Laura's small hands moved through the soapy water as she helped Ma with the dishes, the rhythm of their work soothing in its familiarity. Beyond the open doorway, the soft thud of Jack's paws was abruptly replaced by a sharp, urgent bark. Every sound on the prairie seemed louder and more important. There were so few people, so few surprises, that every interruption set hearts fluttering. At Jack's warning, Pa's tall figure stiffened. In an instant, he reached for his gun, a silent assurance in his grip. Laura and Mary clung to Ma's skirts, pressing close in fright and excitement. The world outside their little house could hold so many things: strangers, dangers, stories yet untold. They watched as Pa stepped out onto the sunlit grass, where the light made golden halos around every blade, every shimmering drop of dew. Through the brightness, Laura saw him, a man on horseback, moving steadily toward them, his horse's hooves muted by the thick prairie. The stranger wore leather trousers and a battered coat, dusted by the travels of hard miles and changing weather. His wide-brimmed hat shaded a face brown with sun and wind, but the hand he lifted in greeting was open and intent, meaning friendship, not danger. With a slow smile, Pa lowered his gun and called back a greeting. At once, the tension in the little house eased, and Ma gently smoothed Laura's braided hair with her steady hand. Mr. Edwards introduced himself with an easy, kind grin. He was thin, and his voice held the soft drawl of Tennessee, weaving strange syllables into the early light. It seemed to Laura that he carried with him the wildness and freedom of everywhere he'd traveled, as if he had learned to be part of both the landscape and the dream of a better life. He dismounted, leading his horse beside him, and with that first handshake, an invisible bridge was built between his life and theirs. They sat together on the sun-warmed steps, the simple wooden stairs creaking beneath their weight. Conversation, laughter, and stories wove between Ma's cornbread and the tin cups of hot coffee she brought outside. Laura, small and silent, listened wide-eyed as Mr. Edwards spoke of swirling dust storms the color of sunset, of buffalo herds that shook the earth, and of Indian camps pitched by still lakes in the hush of evening. His words painted the vast land as something alive, fierce, and sometimes kind. Mary listened too, eyes bright, wondering if someday she could see such sights for herself. After that day, Mr. Edwards became part of their days as naturally as wind in the grass or the crackling fire at night. He arrived with stories and advice, wit and help, never asking for payment, always trading what he could spare. When the chimney needed stacking stone by stone, his strong hands joined Pa's, lifting, placing, and laughing at mishaps that turned work into comradeship. He shared venison from his hunts in exchange for sacks of flour, and taught Pa how to catch fish in the winding creek bordering the meadow. Evenings grew lighter with stories. Around the hearth, with flames painting shadows on the walls, Mr. Edwards told of wild rivers, close escapes in the hills, and times when a man's luck changed with the weather. He taught Laura how to track animal prints in the soft earth and how to listen to bird calls echoing through the empty miles. Sometimes he surprised them with small kindnesses, a handful of maple sugar, a scarf for chilly mornings, or a wooden toy he carved for Carrie, the baby who watched from Ma's lap. The prairie, once so wide and unknown, softened at the edges. Neighbors were precious things, as rare as cool water in high summer, and Laura soon understood that friendship was cargo as valuable as any Pa carried in his wagon. Strangers could become kin. Kindness was the currency of survival. One long golden afternoon, as the sun dipped low and painted everything in honeyed light, Mr. Edwards rested a calloused hand on Pa's shoulder. His voice grew serious as he gazed over the fields of blowing grass. In this place, those who survive are as strong as rocks, but good people help each other because there is no one else around, he said. Laura felt the truth of it in her heart. Out here, they were small, just a family tucked into a cabin on the vast sea of grass. But with friends, with new voices and helping hands, the prairie felt less lonely, less wild. She realized they were not isolated, but part of something greater, something built from grit, hope, and the bonds of neighborly trust. Soon, she watched Mr. Edwards prepare to ride home. The sun was a red ball touching the hills, and his shadow stretched far behind him across the waving grass, mingling with the dappled movement of the wind. Laura, Mary, and even Ma all came to the door and waved goodbye. Jack wagged his tail, pacing at their feet as if he understood the importance of this farewell. Mr. Edwards turned and lifted his hat, his broad grin flashing one last time. Then, with a gentle word to his horse, he started back toward his distant homestead, his figure growing smaller and smaller until it blended into the golden evening. Something new had settled gently inside Laura, a feeling of belonging, of courage. The prairie was bigger than she could ever imagine, but within that greatness, they had found a friend. They were not alone anymore. The whisper of wind in the grass was still wild, but now it sounded like a welcome, the melody of a world opening slowly, one handshake at a time.